Hello, everyone. We are back to talk about more Stormlight Archive. We are going to talk about 5 of my favorite moments from Book 3, Oathbringer. Get some food, get some water, kick back and relax. This is probably going to be a semi-longish video, as Oathbringer is now technically the 3rd longest Stormlight book, sitting at about 451,912 words, just behind Rhythm of War and Wind and Truth, of which we are, at time of recording, 49 days away from. So close, yet so far. Anyways, let us dive right in with the first moment that I really enjoy in Oathbringer, which I refer to as a slice of peace. This comes from, I think it's chapter 13? Whichever chapter is titled Chaperone. This, for a series that has, giant anime swords, giant creatures that are crustacean-based and get to, the size of Godzilla, and for a war epic, some might be surprised that one of my favorite moments in this series is just this little bit of downtime between two characters. And in this case, it is Adolin and Shallan. Adolin comes to her door, bringing her dinner, and the two of them are going to go over evidence and leads regarding a couple of murders that have happened in Urithiru. And what they eventually determine is copycat murders and attacks. And honestly, this chapter kind of cements why Adolin and Shallan are one of my favorite Cosmere couples. Because, Adolin shows up while, I'm trying to remember if Shallan has, her safe hand uncovered, and she's not entirely dressed appropriately. She very much, tells him to get out, so she can, be made proper. And, the two of them just sit together, discuss everything, and you can tell both of them are just, they want this relationship between the two of them to work so badly that both of them are just kind of scared of messing it up. Shallan especially. And it's just, it's cute. It's fun. And for people that rarely get any kind of peace in their lives, with Adolin being a soldier and Shallan being a Knight Radiant, it's nice. And also, I love characters, inhuman characters, that are told to do something. In this case, we're talking about Shallan's Spren, Pattern, who is very much an inhuman character, and she tells him to just be their chaperone and just sit and watch them, and he's just like, why? Just do it. And, just at one point during the middle of the conversation, I love when these inhuman characters pick up on human characteristics. That Shallan and Adolin are, in the middle of a conversation, and it just clicks in Pattern's head, and it's like, oh, I'm here to keep you two from having sex. And they're just like, yes, thank you, Pattern. Thank you for figuring that out. And it's comedic, it's fun, And I love it. Pattern is probably not one of my up there favorite characters, but he's one of them. He's fun. Oh, sorry, one sec. Oh, my throat's been acting weird all day, so naturally I'm gonna record like a half hour at least video. And this is one of those chapters that, even though my girlfriend is not that big into Stormlight Archive, and she probably never will be, which is fine, I do kind of want to read this chapter to her, just because it is sweet and cute. Which means I should probably work on a pattern voice. Darn it, that's a third voice I have to come up with, how I want to talk. Hoid, design, and now pattern. Anyway, I'm divulging. Or divulging? No. Diverging. That is the word I want. Man, it's a good thing I don't ever edit these flubs out. The second moment is, of course, you knew it was coming. Just an imagery moment. In this case, it is the story of the girl who looked up. And in this version, that's right, there's two versions in this story. It's Shallan sitting in what was obviously sort of like a theater in Irithiru, a stage where people would gather and watch things be put on, plays be put on. And in this instance, she's putting on a show for Pattern of this story of the girl who looked up, the story of a girl from a village who sees a giant wall and questions why it is there, with all her elders telling her, just don't go beyond it, just don't worry about it, pretend it's not even there, there's, monsters on the other end of it, blah blah blah. And she uses her light weaving. She could just sit there and, tell the story to Pattern, but no. She uses her light weaving to put on a show, and she notes that she goes beyond what her abilities have normally been thus far. And she's surprised at what she can do. Shallan really does get to experiment and mess with her powers in this book, see what she can do. And she grows a bit as a Radiant in this story. And speaking of Shallan, she is our third moment as well. And in this instance, it is her, Shallan, versus the Midnight Mother. As I stated earlier, there is a series of copycat acts of violence, murders, assaults that are occurring in Irithiru, the home of the Knights Radiant. And Shallan, under the guise of her altar veil, which both acts as a disguise and is a split personality, an altar for Shallan, as Shallan suffers from, I don't know if suffers is the correct term. It's not, I should word that better. Shallan deals with dissociative identity disorder, and while Veil did appear in the last novel, Words of Radiance, we get more of her in this book, and we also get to meet Shallan's other alter, Radiant. She has kind of two main ones. With Veil being the sort of street smarts, get down in the filth with all the commoners, stuff like that. This sort of go out and do things that Shallan, the bright lady, and eventually sort of, I guess, kind of like a princess, can't really do. And then there's Radiant, who is just kind of the more confident warrior version of Shallan. Like, she basically is just kind of Shallan, except, you know, has way more confidence, is good with weapons, that sort of deal. Whereas Vale does actually kind of look different than Shallan. But anyway, under the guise of Vale, Shallan has managed to track down this copycat murderer. She and Bridge 4 track it into the tunnels and bowels of Irithiru. And she figures out that it is some kind of spren. She, Adolin, and Bridge 4 follow it into a dark, uncharted pit. And there they discover that it is not just a spren, it is one of the Unmade. In this instance, Re-Shafir. And she is waiting for them. The Unmade are these twisted spren that were corrupted, not corrupted, but they are from Odium. They are splinters of Odium, this dark god. There are 9 of them, with Re-Shafir being among them. They're heavily mythologized in, like, Rasharan society, to the point that some people don't even believe they exist. But any of the stories about them describe them as these twisted, inconceivable, almost Lovecraftian type spren that are just, they're creepy, they're horrifying. With Re-Shafir herself, also known as the Midnight Mother, is described as an oily black entity capable of taking on various different forms, including humanoid, beastly, and some that do not mimic living beings. Fan art of her, which I wish I could throw up in the video. At some point I ought to see if the paid version of my editing software would allow me to do that. Shows off her having this, she's this giant creature with multiple appendages and feces, and is pouring out of this mass. She's bloody creepy. The Midnight Mother spawns shadow figures to attack the group as they retreat. And Shallan decides to confront Re-Shafir, using Stormlight and her light weaving to create her own group of fighters. The Midnight creatures back away from these creatures made of light, and the group is able to combat them, moving closer and closer to the Unmade, allowing Shallan to get right up on her. And she touches the Unmade. In a confrontation between their minds, Shallan attacks Re-Shafir and realizes that the Unmade had been trapped by a light weaver, just like her, and that the Midnight Mother fears it happening again. Using this knowledge, Shallan is able to drive the Unmade off. Excuse me. Very much a heroic moment for Shallan, being able to drive off this twisted piece of a dark god. But for those that, know the Cosmere well, they know that Re-Shafir is debatably, she might not entirely be on the side of, no. Am I thinking of Re-Shafir, or am I thinking of somebody else? I might be thinking of Shanjanat. Hey, Will. Future Will. Edit all that out. Our penultimate moment is another one of Shallan. For those that haven't picked up on it, Shallan is my second favorite character in the Stormlight Archive, following on the heels of Kaladin. And in this case, I refer to this as the girl who stood up. And actually, I think that's the chapter title, too. While in the city of Alethkar? I think it's Alethkar. Yes, while in the city of Alethkar. Man, I'm going to have to do some editing on this one. While in the city of Alethkar, trying to find a way to get to the Oath Gate, to activate it, and so that Dalinar can send their forces through it to retake the city from the Fused. Shallan, in her efforts to be able to get close to the Oath Gate, has been stealing food from, the upper class as Vale, and has been giving it to the starving people. Never mind, it's called Kholinar. Alethkar is the whole frickin'... You know what? No, I'm not editing any of this out, because that's too much work. Anyway, she's been feeding the starving people of Kholinar. Can you tell I'm a fake fan? This totally isn't my favorite series. And this has, unfortunately for her, led to some consequences that she didn't intend. A gang of men have been abusing those that she's tried to help. And this even leads to the death of this orphaned boy. And Shallan / Bale spends the night weeping in an abandoned home, just unable to cope or deal with the fact that she has caused more pain and suffering, even though she was trying to help people. While there, she remembers the murders of her parents at her hand, the deaths of people she knew. And normally when Shallan remembers things that she doesn't want to, she tries to shove it to the back of her mind. But her ideals as a light weaver won't allow her to bury certain memories anymore. Namely, the murders of her mother and father at her own hand. And she's losing herself in the different personalities that she's formed, thinking that she herself is too weak and not worthy of anything. The following morning, Wit arrives and sits with Shallan. Just sits with her, waiting for her to start the talking in her own time. And eventually she does confide in him. The two talk, and eventually they do a reenactment of the girl who looked up, using their own respective abilities. As Hoyd does have a different form of light weaving power that comes from his homeland of Yolam, which that's the whole thing. We're not going to get into that here. Wit tells her that failures are a part of life, and while the world is horrible, it's a better place for having Shallan in it. That despite, the bad things that have happened around to and because of her, that she is not made a worse person by the world. Basically, just shit happens. But she's trying. She's still trying to do and be good. And that the world is brighter for having people like Shallan in it. He then shows her two illusions of herself. One who collapses under the weight of everything, and the other who stands tall and lives on after forgiving herself. With Wit delivering one of my favorite lines from this whole series. Accept the pain, but don't accept that you deserved it. And then Shallan gets a much-needed hug from Wit. Which, again, Adolin would be aghast by, because it's Wit. And finally, one of the longest points of this video. Oh, I realized just now, I didn't hold up the book. I don't even have the book over here. One moment. Let me rectify that. Oh. Enjoy the Christmas tree, Bendy and Bowser. Hey, here's the book. Oh god, I suck. Oh, I suck as a YouTuber. Why do people watch me? So anyway, the fifth, final, and longest moment of from this book. Excuse me. And since I stopped the video to burp, let me add more gas fuel by continuing to drink. The fifth moment. You cannot have my pain. Anyone familiar with the books knows what's coming. Throughout the novel, we are shown flashbacks to Dalinar's younger years, when he and his brother Gavilar were conquering the kingdoms of Roshar. We have been given glimpses of Dalinar as the Blackthorn, this legendary conqueror and warrior. But the flashbacks in this book show us the kind of man he really was. He always wanted to be fighting, killing, was bored by politics and dismayed by anything that would take him away from the battlefield and being the man he thought he was. This included his wife, Evie, the mother of Adolin and Renarin. And what is probably one of the most painful and disturbing flashback sequence, we see how Dalinar ordered an entire city to be put to the torch, killing thousands, not with the sword, but by fire. We're talking men, women, children. The setup to this being he tried to sue for peace against an enemy combatant, and he was tricked and betrayed, ambushed. And on his way back, what's known as the thrill, this berserker-like rage that what is initially thought to be a Alethi,
Hello.
Hi there. I'm not cutting this out, by the way.
Okay.
So, don't mind me.
Okay.
Slight vocal cameo from my girlfriend there. But what is thought to be a Alethi trait, this berserker-like rage, this bloodlust, eventually is, in fact, discovered to be an effect of another of the Unmade. Dalinar comes back to the war camp just filled with this rage, this hate. And that is what inspires him to put this kingdom to the torch. Unknowingly to him, his wife is among the people that he has just killed. She had tried to sue for peace because she hated seeing Dalinar in that state. She hated that he killed so many people, that he was just consumed by battle lust. And he did try to be better for her, but it was, yeah, it didn't really work out. We then see how he turned to drink to drown out the screams and cries that haunted him afterward. But this wasn't enough, and he even began to resent his sons, that last piece of his wife. And this partly shakes him out of the state that he's in. But even then, it still wasn't enough. And we know that he did go to the Night Watcher. And while we know that the Night Watcher took his memories of Evie, and basically all these flashbacks that we've seen are memories that are slowly coming back over the course of the book. Excuse me. We do learn eventually that he didn't go there to forget. He went there because he wanted forgiveness. And then, cultivation showed up and did some things. But this man, the Blackthorn, stands in a stark contrast of the man that we have seen in the previous two novels. A man that puts honor, duty, and family above all else. A man who had grown to be disgusted by wholesale slaughter and war. A man who, for all intents and purposes, had changed. Again, granted, some of this was through magical means via amnesia. Thanks again to cultivation. But even after these memories start to return, Dalinar still tries to be the man we're used to seeing. The one trying to bring all of humanity together through peace and diplomacy, so that they might band together and save themselves from destruction by an alien force and a dark god. And it's when Dalinar confronts this dark god, Odium, that we truly see what I believe is a core theme of the Stormlight Archive. That despite anything we've done in our past, what has happened in our lives, we can change. We can be better. Odium tries to get him to let go of his mistakes, to let go of the awful things that Dalinar has done, and to renounce responsibility for him. Blame me. Let go of all your emotions to this. I caused all of this. I made you do these things. I was trying to shape you into my perfect champion, my warrior. You didn't do these things. I did. And Dalinar says no. I will not blame you for this. I will not give in to your demands. I will not just cast aside all this pain, all this suffering that I feel for what I have done. You may have been over my shoulder watching, manipulating, and causing these events to happen, but I still chose. I did these things. You cannot take that from me. You cannot take my wife from me. You cannot have my pain. He accepts all that he's done. The pain of all of it. And refuses to give in to Odium. And later in the book, a mystery that's haunted Dalinar since the start of the series is solved. When Gavilar died at the hands of Szeth, the assassin in white, Szeth honored Gavilar's request to write out his last words. Tell my brother, what are the most important words a man can say? Now, whether Dalinar or Gavilar meant these words specifically, the answer that Dalinar comes up with is, I will do better. Throughout the journey of our life, we will all stumble, make mistakes, and fall. And we can allow those mistakes and failures to define us, or we can make the choice to stand back up, take the next step, and resolve to do and be better than we were before. And that brings us to the end of my 5 favorite moments from Oathbringer. I don't really have one from Dawnshard. I do really like that book. I do like the story of Dawnshard. I like that we got more of Lopen. I really like that we get more of Rissyn. And just the uniqueness, at least from what I've read. I know there's probably a bunch of other books that have this, and I'm just not aware of them. But the fact that one of the 2 main POV characters of this book is someone who is, for all intents and purposes, wheelchair-bound. Like, Rissyn lost the use of her legs in Words of Radiance, and now we see her struggle with her mobility, her freedom of being able to do things. We see her deal with that in this novella, and it's honestly kind of a nice little story. I really like it. There's other stuff that happens in that book, but yeah, go read it for yourself. Especially since I think some of it's probably important to the greater Cosmere as a whole, if not Stormlight. But, you know, as Brandon often says, we will have to read and find out to see how that all plays out. Anyway, thank you all for joining me again. Hopefully sometime next month we will have our last video, well, second to last video in this series with Rhythm of War. We are getting close to Wind of Truth, and thus the end of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. There are definitely some big moments in Rhythm of War. It's gonna be tough to choose. Some big moments with Kaladin, some big moments with Shallan, and just other things as a whole. Excuse me. Anyways, I will see you guys next month.